Welcome to Zero Knowledge. I'm your host, Anna Rose. In this podcast, we will be exploring the latest in zero-knowledge research and the decentralized web, as well as new paradigms that promise to change the way we interact and transact online. This week, I catch up with Emre and Izaak from O1 Labs. They share an update on the Mina protocol, cover the launch, and look at how the network has evolved since then. We also touch on the organizations that have built Mina and how O1 Labs is experimenting with a new employee-run structure. Lastly, and importantly, we dig into snaps, that is SNARK-powered dApps on the Mina network. But before we start in, I want to share with you a very exciting event that we are putting together this fall. ZK Validator and the Zero Knowledge Podcast bring you ZK Hack, a multi-round online event with workshops and puzzle-solving competitions. The ZK Hack offers ZK enthusiasts and practitioners a space to learn more about ZK, while also giving advanced cryptographers and hackers a challenging competition to try their hand at. Think hackathon meets CTF meets Dark Forest round-based competition, but all focused on ZK tech. And this is supported by our puzzle-building partners Aleo and Enoma, as well as gold sponsors and workshop hosts Aztec, IDEN3, O1 Labs, and Starkware. This event will be running every Tuesday starting October 26th for 7 weeks. We knew we could not cram this all into 2 days. If you're interested in participating in one or many of these workshops or puzzle competitions, do head over to the website now. I've added the link in the show notes. If you sign up, you'll be reminded about updates as well as getting info about the actual workshops as they're happening. I also want to thank this week's sponsor, C-Labs. The C-Labs folks wanted me to let you know about Optics, a new cross-chain project. Optics uses optimistic or optimistic-ish replication of data structures to send messages, tokens, and data between chains and rollups. The Optics-powered token bridge supports bridging ERC20 tokens between any network it is deployed on. No pesky multi-hop bridging to get where you want to go. One send and it's done. The team has recently deployed Optics on Ethereum, Celo, and Polygon mainnets. While it's still in degen beta, you can still use it today via Etherscan. Give it a try, and if you're interested in building a cross-chain application, maybe an NFT bridge, using Optics communication channels, or if you're just very opinionated about which new chains or rollups should be supported by Optics, do reach out to them via GitHub discussions or join the Discord. I've added the link in the show notes. Now, most importantly, they are also hiring Rust and Solidity engineers who would be interested in building out the future of interoperability in crypto. If this sounds like you may want to apply. So thank you again, C-Labs. Now here is my interview all about Mina and snaps with Izaak and Emre. This week, I'm here with Emre Tekeshalp and Izaak Meckler from O1 Labs. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Izaak, you've been on the show before. I think this might actually be your third time on the Zero Knowledge Podcast. The last time you were on was January 2020. And it feels like a million years ago, actually. It's crazy. It was a totally different sort of era. Not only like a different era in the world, but a very different era for Mina, which at the time was called Coda. So yeah, at the time you were running testnets for like 6 months. There was a growing community. There were people running nodes, but it was still a ways off from becoming like a live network. You were figuring out governance. We talked about some interesting use cases. And yeah, since then, the network has launched. So how are you feeling? What's new?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I don't know if you mind. Maybe I'll just recall kind of a funny crypto anecdote of January 2020. I remember going to the Stanford blockchain conference, which was in January 2020.
Yeah.
And it was like, people weren't sure like how seriously to take COVID or whatever. And I was like, what COVID, what is that, And I remember there were a lot of people from China who were there and who were like,
they could see the future.
Kind of joking, like, they were like, oh, like, you guys should, like, I wouldn't eat the food or, whatever. So anyway, yeah, it was definitely a very different time. When I think back to what we've kind of been through with mainnet since then, I feel like we definitely went through the most painful parts before we launched the mainnet, which is great. Because as you mentioned, we were running testnets for a long time. And there were periods of, really painful debugging and problems and whatever, but things have been relatively smooth on mainnet itself. Feels pretty good, I guess.
Good. Emre, this is the first time you're actually on the Zero Knowledge podcast. We should get to know you a little bit. What are you doing? What maybe has changed for you over the last, since January 2020 in your role at Mina?
Yeah, super excited to be here. One of the fans. I don't know how many episodes I've listened to, but always a fan and great to be here. Let's see. Yeah, so I am currently the interim CEO of O1 Labs, and we can get into the interim part a bit later, kind of the transitions that we're going through. And I joined the team a little over 2 years ago. So I joined to help lead our biz dev and general business efforts. And before that, I was at Coinbase, also doing similar biz dev work. Well, not too similar, nothing to do with snarks, but all sorts of crypto stuff, as you might imagine. So, been around for a while. But yeah, it was funny. Like when I think we launched our first testnet the week I joined, or maybe the week after. So it was like, super exciting for the team. Obviously for me as well, but I would have been excited no matter what we were doing.
Yeah.
And then, as he said, it was quite a bit of a grind. And I felt like it's a very thin line between like, oh my God, like if all these issues are coming up on testnet, like how much more is there going to be during mainnet versus, we're actually coming up with all the issues now such that there isn't any on mainnet. So, fortunately so far we've been kind of closer to the latter one, and that feels good.
Can you share with me what launching the network felt like or was? Either of you, kind of like, what was that process like? Because this happened, is it now 6 months ago or so that it happened?
Almost exactly 6 months ago.
Wow. Yeah. So tell me about that process. Like, what was it like?
When people ask me this question, I kind of say it's kind of like launching your first product, doing an IPO, and growing your company like 1,000 times in size all at the same time. Like it's a crazy endeavor. I hope I never get to do this again. And I'm saying that in the best way because it's obviously like it was a lot of excitement and a lot of huge feat on all of our team and all of our community, right? Because it was also like we jumped on this call as the network was being launched, like as the first block was scheduled, and it was all like more community members than O1 Labs team members. And they were the ones who produced the first blocks, and still like we don't run any block producers. It's very community managed. So yeah, it was crazy. It's crazy, I think, is one word to summarize.
Izaak, from your perspective, having worked on this for many years leading up to this launch, what was it like?
It was definitely the actual launch itself was, I think, emotionally kind of weird for me. It was kind of surreal to be, I guess, on that call and like see all these people who, were like so invested in, many of whom I didn't know at all. And I don't know. But I think sometimes when you accomplish something that you had sort of intended to for a long time, there can often be a feeling of a sort of surprising feeling of like emptiness.
Oh no, the anticlimactic launch.
Yeah, just because you sort of I think you have, desire can kind of never really be fulfilled. So, you have this image that you sort of hold out in front of yourself, but it's not, you can never achieve it. So yeah. I think that was probably a little strange. I was also in Los Angeles at the time, which I really don't like, and it fills me also with this sort of a spiritual emptiness. So I think that probably contributed to it. But I always really enjoy when there's kind of, like a spirit of camaraderie and all hands on deck kind of situation, which in the days leading up, there was, and, late nights getting everything just set up just so. So I always enjoy that. So that was fun.
Did you have any sense of relief?
Oh, definitely.
Maybe that was the emptiness almost.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I think it probably has something to do with LA too, but
yeah, fair.
Especially since, I feel kind of responsible for, at the end of the day, the correctness of some of the cryptography involved. So for everything to be working smoothly is, for the last 6 months especially, has definitely been a huge relief.
So in this episode, the goal is to, catch us up on what's going on in the Mina universe, O1 Labs, the creation of the foundation. I want to talk about snaps. That's, I think, one of the key things that I want to cover. I do want to share a quick note about some of the connections that I have, or this podcast basically has, with Mina already. I am an advisor to O1 Labs. I work with you, Emre, and the team on the community side of things. O1 Labs is a sometimes sponsor of the show, but just note, this episode is in no way sponsored. In case people are wondering, I never do paid episodes. I interview the people I find interesting, and I think there's something to actually explore here with snaps. ZK Validator is currently running a block producer on Mina. Yeah, and as part of our contribution to the Mina network, ZKV has even started contributing tools. I want to just do a quick shout out because there's this Mina VRF RS tool built by Kobe Gherkin and Chris Lin within the ZKV umbrella that I've not had a chance to talk about it yet on the show. So yeah, personally, I'm pretty engaged with the project, and I wanted to share all this, but at the same time, I want to kind of like give people a heads up. As involved as we are, there's actually some parts of the Mina project, specifically snaps, that I don't know very much about and would really like to dig into. In fact, I feel a little bit like I should know more. I hope that through this interview, I can find out more and also share it with the audience. But yeah, so we've kind of like given a little bit of a history up to the launch, but there's been a lot of changes. So please, let's maybe start with the org. Let's talk a little bit about Mina and O1 Labs and the foundation. How does this organization now look? And yeah, what's happened since, maybe even since launch? Actually, when did the foundation come out? Was it before or after?
Both. It's been a long work in progress, and I forget now when we kind of announced it, but it was should have been right before launch. Yeah. So to your point, Mina is an open source project that's community managed. Yet, it has to have both a legal structure around it to hold certain assets and be responsible of some of its doings and some of its actions. But also, there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen. So like many other blockchain projects, we thought it would, be in the best interest of the whole project to essentially start a new nonprofit foundation. It's actually a public benefit corporation here in the US. To really, take this whole ecosystem forming, whether it's about grants making or community management or certain marketing related items, or again, certain legal items, and really house them in this nonprofit foundation that's very transparent and nonprofit. So some members of the original O1 Labs team basically departed to start off the foundation. So Evan, who was the original CEO and co-founder of O1 Labs, is now the CEO of Mina Foundation. Also, several members of our marketing team and legal team left to really bootstrap it. We're also super fortunate to have a very experienced board at the foundation with, in addition to Evan, with Josh Cincinnati, former director of Zcash Foundation.
Sometimes co-host of the Zero Knowledge podcast too.
Exactly. Yeah. Lots of familiar faces. Jill Carlson, who's also been in the space for a long time and has been an advisor to us in the past as well as Tess Rainierson from Cosmos or the Interchain Foundation. So yeah, it's a stellar group of folks, and they're really, starting to get up to the ground and really do some amazing stuff with, all the huge ecosystem that's forming around the project. And on the O1 Labs side, we remain a major contributor to the project. Obviously, we incubated the project, but at this point, we're one of three actually contributors, engineering contributors. Obviously, there's many more types of contributors, but engineering contributors to the project. And although obviously we're doing a lot of many different stuff, our focus is slowly shifting to become all about snaps. So I'll save the details there to when we start going into snaps. But yeah, our mission is to really enable this adoption and use case proliferation on top of the project, because as interesting and unique and exciting, many things as Mina is by lieu of its unique design as a layer one, none of that really matters if you don't have usage on top of the platform, and that's our main mission.
Totally. You just mentioned that there were some other teams also building. Is this like dev shops, like a dev team building core infrastructure along with you, or different implementations? Who are those other teams basically, and what are they doing?
It depends. So the second team is ChainSafe. The audience might know them. ChainSafe also contributes to various other exciting projects. For us, they're working on a new Rust-based client that's also going to become what we call a browser node implementation, which is like basically taking the Mina today and taking apart everything but the full node, which is like the 22 kilobyte piece, right? which is the whole vision of Mina. That's already there in our current software, but it's just, strapped in together with everything else. So it just needs to be cleaned up a bit. So that's what they're working on. The third contributor, I'm actually unsure if it's yet announced. It's been signed very recently, but they're also, very experienced, let's say, all Camel Shop, which is the language our client is written in. So yeah, they're basically, decentralizing both software and node development for Mina, as well as adding new features as well.
Cool. And how is O1 Labs now like running itself? You sort of mentioned your interim CEO. Is there, maybe you can explore a little bit what the plan is there.
Yeah, maybe I'll give you a high level, and then Isaac can go over the details, given he and Evan have been thinking about this for a long time. So we're changing our governance structure. So O1 Labs is a for-profit, Delaware Corp, your traditional startup, let's say, based in San Francisco. Although now we're fully remote, so that no longer is the case. And we had a very traditional board structure and voting rights, in a traditional way, whatnot. And we decided to take advantage of this transition with the foundation splitting apart, to also take a look at our governance structure and see how we can make it more sustainable and also more true to the ethos of the entire crypto space we're in. So we're becoming almost there, like officially, an employee governed structure, and I'll let Isaac maybe go through the details of it a bit more.
Yeah, that's, I think, a good intro. I would just add, the motivation, at least for me, in spearheading or kind of pushing for this new structure, is really the idea that in our world, you're not free unless you have control over what's required for your own continued existence, right? So most people, in a sense, are not really free in that they're dependent on their employer or whatever for their continued existence, or an employer.
Mm-hmm.
And so my sincere hope is to create a new kind of society in which that's not the case, in which everyone is free in the sense of not being able to just reproduce the conditions of their own life and existence, and also to create the world that in the way that they kind of see fit, not just sort of being the tool to be used by someone else. That was my own personal interest in pushing for this. And of course, such a project is a society-wide project. It's not something that can happen in one company or anything like that. But my hope is that, this will kind of create experiences and structures that maybe can have some kind of ripple effect over time. And specifically, in terms of just how it's structured, I can just say a few words. So basically, the formal structure is as follows. Everyone who works at O1 Labs who has been working there for more than a year is considered a member.
Okay.
And essentially, the membership elects the board of the company, and the board elects the CEO, as well as ratifies kind of major decisions related to the running of the company. And so the board itself consists of employees, members, and is democratically elected by the employees. So it's sort of real kind of self-governance in that sense. In terms of the day-to-day decision-making, I think that's still a little bit to be worked out, how exactly elements of democratic control can be injected into that, but that's for the future, I guess.
Are there any models that you were kind of looking to when you were thinking about this? Is there any companies or structures that we know about?
Yeah, I think for pretty clear reasons, most people who start companies don't want to pursue such a direction because of the desire to retain control and so on. But there are many examples outside of the technology space, but then there are a few even in tech and in crypto space. So I guess I can just point at some in the crypto space in particular. So there's one called Informal Systems, who work on Cosmos, I think, primarily. I'm not exactly sure how they're structured, but I know they have some kind of democratic governance. Emre, were you going to say something about that?
Sure. Yeah, they're somewhat similar. They've also innovated a bit more with their shareholder structure, as far as I can remember as well. But we decided to start with keeping things simple. So as an example, we have similar shareholders, and employees are shareholders, and one of the benefits is that employees get to own a larger portion of the company than they would, in your classical startup. So we've worked out a few models to basically share more of the company with the employees, because they're the ones who spend their days, hopefully not a lot of nights, but usually days to, basically create some value and create new products and services. So it just makes sense to us.
There's a whole lot of smaller businesses that operate this way. I live in Berkeley, and Berkeley is very famous for having a lot of cooperatives for some reason. I'm not sure why. I guess maybe ex-hippies or something.
Hmm.
So like if for Berkeley residents, you might be familiar with like, or even the Bay, like Arismendi or Cheeseboard, or there's like a skate shop that's a co-op. So there's lots of like kind of small, non-tech businesses that are run this way. There's also large companies that are run this way. There's a really famous one called Mondragon, which is in Spain. They do sort of, I think, it's manufacturing. They manufacture all kinds of different things. They have, I think, a few thousand employees.
To me, it makes sense, though, like there's so many experimentations with decentralization on the networks, and yet companies tend to just take up pretty traditional company structures. And it seems sort of, in a weird way, antithetical. Like it's you're putting a regular old company together with something so novel.
Yeah. I think the rhetoric of people in the space often contradicts the reality of control and ownership. There's a lot of rhetoric about democratization and community control and so on, but that's pretty infrequently the reality. There's usually a few, large players who will control most of these projects, or anyway.
How big is the team actually today?
So today, the O1 Labs team is 25 of employees.
Oh, that's a nice size.
Yeah, it's a nice cozy size, yet large enough. And then the foundation has another 13, 15 people.
Okay.
So overall full time, there's about 40. But obviously, a lot of community members are, I wouldn't say full time, but spending a lot of hours on doing very super valuable stuff. Like there's so many tools that are developed by community members. So if you add it all up, it adds up.
Nice.
To any listeners who are either founders of companies, to whom this is an interesting idea, I don't know if there will be any people like that, or more likely, probably employees at companies to which, controlling your own destiny, so to speak, at your organization sounds appealing. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. You can DM me on Twitter. IZMeckler is my handle, so get in touch.
Cool. Are you looking to sort of spread the word, get more teams thinking about this?
Well, yeah. I mean, as I said, it's sort of, for me, part of a larger desire to see a broader transformation in society. So if anyone is interested in pursuing that, I'm very happy to share what I can.
Cool. So one thing we haven't yet done on the show, I'm realizing now, is really define what Mina is. We've started in with a bit of an assumption that people had listened to previous episodes, but if they hadn't, I think it makes sense for us to do like a quick primer. We've been talking about the Mina protocol. We talk about O1 Labs, the Mina Foundation, but let's go back to that protocol. What is Mina? What does it do? How is it different? Yeah, and then I want to talk about snaps.
So Mina today is a proof of stake blockchain that has the novel feature that it's a succinct blockchain. And what that basically means is there's a really small amount of data. So in all the marketing materials, they say 22 kilobytes. It's actually less than that.
Oh, cool.
But there's a really small amount of data that anyone can download, something on the order of 22 kilobytes, let's say, which will enable one to sort of verify the entire history of all the transactions and all the blocks that have occurred in the chain so far. And what this means is basically everyone in the network, as far as like interacting with the shared state of the chain goes, is on kind of equal footing. There's no need to kind of delegate trust to like, miners / stakers, or like a block explorer, God forbid, or anything like that, as is usually done. Mina going forward will be that plus a platform basically for private scalable applications, and which we call snaps. And we'll get into that later in the show. I don't know, Emre, if there's anything you want to add there.
Maybe another, like there's two perspectives to look at Mina. One of which is how Izzy just covered it, like the genesis of it and how it's evolving. And I think another is all blockchains at the end of the day are like these shared state layers, right? They're universally accessible state layers. most of them are optimized in one direction or not. Like Bitcoin is only for transfers, Ethereum is for all smart contract transactions. I don't know, Solana is for super fast transactions. I think one thing we're discovering is like as zero knowledge proof systems are better understood, as their features, for snarks and what have you, are more in demand, Mina becomes like this super, based on what we know, the most efficient zero knowledge proof state layer out there. Because, if you look at Ethereum, et cetera, those are not efficient in verifying zero knowledge proofs. It just becomes super expensive. Whereas Mina is, born into zero knowledge proofs, like it's made of zero knowledge proofs. So it becomes like this super efficient native zero knowledge proof layer, state layer that we're seeing a lot of demand for. And nowadays, as you mentioned, its use case is becoming this privacy layer for basically the entire crypto space.
When you mentioned, Izaak, the 22 kilobyte, I know, and you said maybe it's smaller, that is a proof, right? That is a SNARK proof.
Yeah. So that's basically, just to kind of elaborate a little bit, at any point in time, there's like the current state of the chain, right? Which is like all the information that's required for like checking consensus stuff, like how long is the chain and some proof of stake related data. And then like basically the database of accounts. We'll call that like the blockchain state. That on Mina is accompanied by a little proof, which is a snark, that basically says, there is a blockchain that, when you run through it, like ends up with this blockchain state. And so the only kind of big thing in this whole picture is the database of accounts. And that's like represented in the blockchain state that a light full node, or whatever you want to call it, would receive. That would be represented just as the Merkle root of that database of accounts.
Okay.
So if you want to know anything about the state, you basically get this little blockchain state, the accompanying proof that says, hey, this really is like a valid blockchain state. And then, you can get Merkle paths to see whatever you want to see about the current state.
And are those both in that thing that is downloaded? Like those two things, the Merkle root and the proof? Is that kind of the one thing that's under 22 kilobytes?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So when it comes to the SNARK proofs themselves, though, who makes those? Like where are those coming from?
So there's sort of two network participants who kind of co-construct these proofs. Every time a block is produced, the block producers sort of take the old proof corresponding to the old chain and kind of, extend it by one to build the proof corresponding to the next chain. But that proof, at least initially, that the block producer kind of extends by one, it doesn't contain all of the transactions that happened right in that block. There's a little bit of a kind of a delay in which all the transactions from, that block will then be kind of compressed into a proof and then again folded back in. And the work of taking all of the transactions and compressing them into proofs, which are then kind of folded in to this like chain proof, that's performed by other nodes on the network that we usually refer to as snark workers. Mm-hmm. And that's like anyone can do that. It's not permissioned. And basically they earn fees for doing this work of compressing the transactions.
Cool. The reason I wanted to ask about that is because now I want to talk a little bit about snaps. So everything we've covered so far, I think we may have even mentioned somewhere on previous episodes, but everything we've talked about Mina at least. But now going forward, snaps. Like you mentioned, it's a platform for private applications that work on the Mina network. But what are they actually?
Yes. So the basic setup is like this. So basically there will be a new kind of account called a snap account.
Okay.
And unlike on, say, Ethereum, where the code of the smart contract is stored fully in that account, in snaps on Mina, only the verification key corresponding to that contract will be stored in the account. And so this is like a small piece of data that you can kind of think of as like a hash of the code corresponding to the contract.
When you say verification key, though, are you talking in the snark context of like prover verifier?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, the programmer will like write their smart contract,
mm-hmm.
and that will kind of get compiled into a verification key, which is kind of like a hash of the whole contract, and that's what will actually get stored on chain.
All right. But it's interesting, you don't call it a proof. This is the verification key.
Yeah, it's like a hash of the contract.
Would proofs be like sent to that verification key, and that's where the contract is like making sure like the interaction is it that way where it's like the verification key lives in the contract?
Yeah, so the verification key lives on chain, and then when like a user wants to interact with that contract, they will basically create a proof corresponding to that verification key, and then they'll send a transaction that has that proof attached to it to the chain, and that'll kind of get checked against the verification key in that account, and it'll say, hey, did the user like basically run this contract correctly?
And actually, as you say this is similar, like a ZK rollup is doing something similar, right? The smart contract is holding the verification and a proof is submitted to it, I believe.
Yeah, it's similar. Yeah, it's similar in that sense.
Cool.
So I guess just to kind of go back to how a developer, let's say, actually programs a snap, and then like how a user actually interacts with it. So basically, we're developing a set of tools based on a library so we've long had this library Snarky, which is an OCaml library for like writing zero knowledge proof systems, and that we use in Mina. And we've, kind of against my naive hopes, no one really likes writing OCaml. So now we have a new library called Snarky.js, which is basically a TypeScript library that provides a similar functionality to Snarky, but in a much more user-friendly way because it's just TypeScript. And so the developer writes their smart contract using TypeScript, using Snarky.js. And as I said, the contracts aren't really run on chain. Like executions are verified on chain, but the contracts themselves are not really run on chain. What happens is the developer like writes their contract using Snarky.js. It gets compiled into some JavaScript, which is quite portable. All the crypto is using WASM, so it runs in the browser. You can run it on a server using Node. It's actually really, I'm really proud of how easy it is to set up. It's just like you npm install Snarky.js, and then you're off to the races. And basically, users will use that kind of JavaScript bundle corresponding to the contract to interact with the contract, essentially, and then to generate proofs of their interaction with the contract, which then get verified on chain and applied to the Mina blockchain state.
Okay. Yeah, it's basically like, so part of the contract this is happening off chain, but the way that you're kind of doing validity proofs or some like proving that those have happened correctly is through the mechanism you just described.
Yes, exactly. So like all the contract execution, basically most of it happens off chain, which is how you can enable privacy as well, because like sensitive data doesn't need to be submitted to the chain. Private user data doesn't need to be submitted to the chain in order for the chain to know that the contract was executed correctly, because you're providing this proof of the correctness of the execution.
And the only thing that's written on chain, like you wouldn't be able to like see the thing that's written on chain and then like deduce what had actually been executed. It's just that you know that execution happened correctly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because of the magic of zero knowledge.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to understand about snaps, though, is at least in the way that I've understood it, is this connection between like real world data and the Mina protocol and the smart contracts. Where is that happening? What does that mean? And then maybe we can even take an example. Maybe you have like a use case that will help us understand this a bit better.
So if you zoom out a bit, right, one of the issues in the blockchain space today is that there's no really easy and prolific way to import data, right, from the rest of the internet, from the Web 2.0 world that the 99% of the world uses, into Web3, into the crypto land. Perhaps the only way to do that is using oracles, right? But those are very rudimentary solutions where, there's an intermediary, a set of intermediaries that only, stream a specific set of data. And this causes a lot of problems because, people exist in the real world, like in the real internet or the Web 2 internet, and then, they can't start from scratch. Not everyone can start from scratch. Not everyone is the nerds that we all are, right? Like we like to dig into everything. So there needs to be this easy link. And as we were thinking through this problem, again, through the magic of zero knowledge and other cryptography, what we stumbled upon was that, hold on a second, all the modern websites are HTTPS. They're all cryptographically signed. And that is a computation, right? So that can be SNARK, basically. So what we've come up with is, we're improving upon it as a protocol, which is going to be a library within our Snaps SDK stack. where you can basically prove that any data exists on any website as long as it's HTTPS, right? And that any user individual can prove that the data is legitimate, along with the type of computation or fact checking that they want to run on it, right? The private computation that Izaak just talked about, and then share that onto Mina. So basically, you don't have to resort to any oracles, or you're not limited with whatever data the oracles are streaming. So you can grab any data from any website and share it privately. I kind of see it as those in the US might be more familiar, but like a private plaid for everything, right? Like if you think of this plaid, the service that in the US we're all stuck with, where you have to use to link your bank, and it only works with banks. And Plaid sees all your private information, all your financial like banking statements, and so does whomever they're linking it to. With this, there's no intermediary. You're using the magic of zero knowledge, and you're able to share all that information privately to the service provider that you want to use. So that's at a very high level. Maybe Izaak can speak a bit more onto how it actually happens.
Yeah, I will also just want to stress like two things about what you said. So like the first thing is it differs from existing things, as Emre was saying, in that it's really easy to import from any existing data source. You don't have to like make a new oracle or whatever, as long as it's like on the web, on HTTPS, which pretty much everything is. And then the second is it's possible to use this data without like having to reveal it publicly. Because like normally any kind of oracle data would be operating in an on-chain context where it has to be revealed publicly for the contract to use it. But with snaps, and we're calling it this kind of functionality web snaps, because like the smart contract execution is happening locally, you don't have to post that data publicly anywhere.
There had been an example that had been floated to me by someone else who was explaining or trying to explain snaps to me, which was this idea of like GitHub commits as a potential source. Would this be something possible? Like you sort of said it's HTTPS, but is it sort of like any public record that is in a browser that's provable could be incorporated into this?
If you wanted, you could be like, I have an NFT, like maybe you have a smart contract that like mints an NFT corresponding to GitHub commits that are longer than 5,000 lines or something like that, whatever. So that's, if you wanted to do that, you could do it.
It does allow for many, interesting novel use cases though. Like some might be just hacky, interesting, fun things like what you just mentioned around GitHub commits, or like if a Reddit vote or Reddit post receives a certain number of upvotes, you can mint a commemorative NFT or whatever, right? It's because anything you see on a website is possible to be linked. Or there's, more, let's say, serious examples as well. One proof of concept that we released earlier on was with an Ethereum dApp called, in the DeFi space, called Teller, and they're trying to do unsecured lending. And we were able to basically link the credit score of any user on Credit Karma, which is again a popular credit score checking website in the North America. And you can grab your data from Credit Karma. By the way, we never talked to Credit Karma. Like it wasn't like they needed to set up a special API for us or anything. It just works. And you prove that your credit score is above a certain threshold, and you share that proof with Teller. And they verify it. So, they don't see your social security number. They don't see your actual credit score. They just get this proof that a source that they trust, which in this case is Credit Karma, because many people trust them, has shared that your credit score is above, let's say, 700. But sky's the limit because, this is infinitely programmable.
Emre, in the example you just gave, is there any sort of NFT of this in there? Izaak, you had sort of mentioned NFTs a few times. And I'm just wondering if it's like, if there's an NFT of some action, is that helpful, or does that like super not matter? It's just like something that it could be a mechanism to use it.
Could be. We actually haven't like really like NFTs, it's like hype cycle. So now we have to think about NFTs, I guess. But yeah, it's not like it's definitely not a core part of the system. You could, and I'm sure developers will come up with cool ways to make the system better thanks to NFT-like structures. But it's not like a requirement or anything.
Do you also see, you talk about web data, and maybe this is sort of ridiculous, but would you also be able to use this for other networks, for other blockchains? Or is there like no point in doing that because those are public ledgers that are already like shared?
No, you could. It's actually, there's some pretty cool use cases in this. Like our team has been working on a lot of, like cool demos. One of them, for example, is like, let's say a exclusive, messaging board for people that only own Bitcoin or who can prove that they own Bitcoin before, I don't know, 2014, right? Or, if you own a CryptoPunk, but in these instances, you don't have to share your address, right? So even if you owned, zero point 0.01 Bitcoin, you can hang out in the same club with the person who owns, I don't know, 10,000
Oh,
Bitcoin,
wow.
because you're not sharing your address. You're only proving that you own Bitcoin before a certain date, or you have more than an X amount of Bitcoin or Ethers, right? Because again, you're just proving that a certain cryptography, in this case, the signing of a public key with a private key, is legitimate. And then on the flip side, there's an interesting, not to take it to too many places, but there's an interesting flip side to this. If you go back to the genesis of Mina, which is the succinct blockchain, the core premise, not only does it enable anyone, joining the Mina network as a full node from your browser, smartphone, whatever, but other blockchains are also computers. So other blockchains can also join Mina as a full node. So this creates the possibility for these trustless bridges where an Ethereum dApp or Polkadot, Solana, whatever, they can all be running full node verifiers of Mina within their chain as a smart contract. And dApps on Ethereum, such as Teller, right, can be monitoring that smart contract for state updates to Mina and basically grab the snap verification of whatever data that they're trying to verify on Mina and basically use Mina as an add-on to their application. So it's not like to benefit from this, developers have to move their entire application over, have to deal with this very complex and strategic decision. It's just an add-on. So we only see this as a value add to the entire space and basically as a gateway, right, between, the Web2 data and Web3 services.
Yeah, this is interesting. I actually want to talk about bridges a little bit more, but before we do that, I actually want to talk, I sort of want to just go over what we just covered. This idea that like you're taking any cryptographic action, proof or something, and you're actually able to use whatever it describes without revealing what it describes in a snap for some other action. So I think the one you just said is like you have some cryptographic thing that allows you in a club. You can prove that you have that thing without revealing what you actually have, where your address is, the amounts or whatever. And that through a snap, it would like allow, like the snap itself would be like the club maker and you'd be allowed into it. I don't know, maybe it's a very vague example, but that's really cool. I don't know. For me, that sort of, I think it is the first time that I'm actually understanding snaps. I have tried to get into it before. So I'm really glad if I got it right. I think I got it right, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, totally.
Clubs are not the only use case, but yeah.
Okay.
I think like a lot of the quote unquote use cases which have been perpetuated so far have been kind of limited to either, fantasy realms of game related things or fantasy realms of financial speculation, because there's nothing to refer to. You know what I mean? Like everything has to only refer to things within the system. So it's kind of not very meaningful in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So this will kind of open the door to just bring in all of this like existing meaning in some sense and meaningful data to operate on.
So at first, when I heard about this idea of like bringing Web2 stuff in, and I don't know that it is in any way a reference to this, but is it at all like a Wayback Machine where you can like, it sort of proves something at a certain time, that at a certain time something was true? Is there any, for some reason, it was this idea of like logging HTTPS, like somehow like proving that it existed. It made me think of this Wayback Machine, but am I totally off base? Is there any connection there?
It is like that. It's like, it's kind of like an authenticate, like a verifiable screenshot. Okay. So it's like, you might want to like use some fact, right? So you'd be like, hey, like I got an email from, I don't know, who's a famous person. The president emailed me. Okay. And you're like, no, I don't believe you. So then I would be like, oh yeah, no, really, the president emailed me. Here's a screenshot to prove it, right? But it's like, okay, well, a screenshot, I know I know how to use Photoshop. I'm sure you do too. You can do that yourself. But actually, you already kind of have the data in hand to really prove that the president really, well, email is kind of a special case, but let's say Twitter DM'd you or something.
Okay.
Because you have this TLS transcript that comes from a trusted source, like probably you're not able to like go in Twitter and like edit their database of DMs. You know what I mean? So you actually have this cryptographic data of the TLS transcript, which is sort of like a cryptographic screenshot that then you can wrap up in a snark and use inside of a snap.
Now I kind of want to go back to the concept you brought up, Emre, this idea of bridges. And I know bridges is like a key part of like Mina's plans right now. But first of all, what bridges are there? Are there already live bridges, or what bridges should we expect to see pretty soon?
There aren't any live bridges today. They take a while to build, but we have announced a few initiatives. The first one we announced a while back actually is a joint grant or an RFP with the Ethereum Foundation to build essentially a full node bridge from Mina to Ethereum. So this would include like an efficient verifier of the Mina snark within EVM and everything else that comes with it. So the Mina Foundation has actually found, and the Ethereum Foundation, they found a developer to start working on this. They are going to announce it soon, but so that's getting started on. And then it was also recently announced, thanks to the proliferation of EVM, right? Polygon also is going to leverage this bridge because they're basically able to reuse it very, very fast. And obviously we're in touch with other non-EVM layer ones as well because they're interested in the same functionality because it basically kind of opens the doors of Web 2.0 to the dApps on their platform. So that's a valuable use case, and we see bridges as the way where Mina is another layer one, but it should be able to talk to other layer ones if we want to really enable this for developers, because as great as Mina is, other chains are great in other things, and we want to respect that and enable everyone to do this.
I want to now look at how the snap, and I know you had mentioned sort of a path for a snap over a bridge, but maybe we can just cover that again, because I think you just mentioned it really, really quickly, but I want to explore that. Like, I'd love to think of an example of what exists today on Ethereum using that bridge, a snap, and I guess bringing back that result. I sort of want to know how that would work, because it's not necessarily like token exchange happening here, right? It's like data exchange across this bridge.
Sure. So maybe just to, explore more examples. Let's say a Ethereum dApp again, or DeFi dApp wants to serve only users who can prove that they're not a resident of the US. I was going to do it the other way around, but no, no app does that. No one welcomes US users. Thank you, SEC and others. Anyways, sorry. But they don't want to, hold on to any of the user, like any of the PII, any of the personally identifying information, because, data nowadays is a liability. So what can be done thanks to snaps is there can be a snap that basically leverages any KYC provider that this DeFi app trusts. Let's say it's one of the crypto exchanges, right? Let's say it's Coinbase. And by using either Coinbase's APIs or even just the web page itself, the snap can, the user would have to log into their Coinbase account, and then the snap would basically guide them to the page or the API endpoint that shows that they have a verified KYC with Coinbase. And then it would generate a proof on the user's machine of that. Mm-hmm. And then the user would also, by the way, all of this would happen in a nice app with a nice UX.
Nice UI.
And then the user would submit that proof via a transaction on Mina to a Snap account that's set up to verify such proofs. So you remember when, Izzy was describing the architecture, these Snap accounts are basically holding the verification key, and only if they receive a Snap transaction with that proof that is able to be verified by that verification key, so by that circuit, do they update their state, right? So let's assume it's true, it goes through, and then the Snap account updates its state to say this proof checks out. This basically what it does is this address has a proof that says that they have access to a valid Coinbase account. And you can also combine this with other conditionals, such as do they have access to a KYC account that also has a name Emre Tekeshop, right? So that I'm not grabbing someone else's KYC data. And then this DeFi app in return is also monitoring the the smart contract that tracks the Mina state. And because the Snap account is associated with Mina's global state, that smart contract will also update its state, right? Because it's checking the canonical Mina snark and it's getting the other, the other information from the Merkle root. And then that DeFi app then can basically, look at that smart contract and say, yep, the KYC has passed through, or the user with this address who also happens to have this Ethereum address has access to a Coinbase KYC account with the name Emre and Izaak. So I'm gonna serve this person because they're not in the US.
And then it gets executed on the Ethereum side.
Yeah, everything else is happening on Ethereum, right? Or the host chain, like all the logic keeps happening there. Of course, the other benefit of snaps, right, is that because computation is off chain, they're much cheaper, right? So we do believe over time that, hopefully these applications also see other benefits of Mina, both the succinctness as well as, the cheaper computation cost, similar to ZK rollups, right, on Ethereum, and then decide to move their stuff over to Mina. But, we don't want to burden folks with that decision because, yes, like Mina is new. There'll be many deficiencies compared to more mature ecosystems like Ethereum. But we want to provide this benefit right away. So that's why we see the concept of bridges here as very important.
Are these bridges, this is a topic in general I want to explore more, maybe in a whole episode, but this type of bridge, like the snark itself still lives on the Snap side, right? The snark, or actually what you described, like, is there part of the snark, actually I think you did say this, like the prover is sort of going over this bridge, right? Like there's a proof going over the bridge, but otherwise most of the snark lives on the Snap?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the way that I would say it is there is the kind of Mina super snark that basically, verifying the Mina snark implicitly verifies every single snark that has ever been posted to the Mina chain. So every execution of every snap and every snark involved in that snap that has ever happened,
Okay.
So what the bridge actually does is basically import the Mina Uber snark into the host, the other blockchain.
Okay.
And verify it there. The Ethereum bridge, the way that it's going to be designed is basically, the Mina Uber snark will sort of be verified on the Ethereum blockchain, like in EVM, and that will kind of give access to all of the information that's already been verified on Mina.
I see. Does that mean is the verification happening in the smart contract on Ethereum?
The smart contract on Ethereum will just verify the Mina Uber snark.
But the Snap actually has the verifier of the proof that the Snap will actually verify is the data part, like the thing you're trying to prove. And then that Snap pushes something into the meta snark that is then verified on the Ethereum chain.
Okay, so let's say you want to make an application that's I want to build, I want to have a smart contract on Mina whose state is basically, the set of all GitHub users who have proven that they have done a commit every day for the last year. I don't know, whatever.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So basically, the way that would work is you would make a snap on Mina that, that has it's a smart contract. It has a method that can be called on it, which is basically provide proof that I am a super committer or whatever. Let's just call it being a super committer. So basically, people can interact with the smart contract by providing it with the cryptographic screenshot of going to their GitHub and showing, hey, I committed every day for the last year. That will, update some state on Mina, which basically records the set of all the users who have provided that kind of proof. And now, after the user gets their cryptographic screenshot, they'll generate a snap proof, by running the GitHub recorder smart contract snap locally. That will generate a proof that they'll submit to the Mina blockchain that will update the state on the Mina blockchain that of all the users who have proven that they're GitHub super committers. And then the Mina snark at that point, the Mina Uber snark, will implicitly, have within it the fact that this set of GitHub users are all super committers. Mm. But you won't have to go and verify all those old proofs. All those old proof verifications are encoded in the Mina Uber snark. And then on Ethereum, you would just verify the Mina Uber snark, and that would also implicitly verify, the correctness of the set of super committers referred to in the Mina state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, except that how does on the Ethereum side, you're talking about the meta snark, but the meta snark also has within it all other Snap activity and transaction activity. there's a lot of things that have gone into that updated snark on the meta snark that the Ethereum side would then verify. But how, like, if it doesn't know the other stuff, how does it still know that just the GitHub data is correct?
Maybe one other way to look at this could be that similar to like the Mina full node, like the generic full node, right? The way that's structured is there is the canonical proof, but there's also like what we mean when we say 22, which is also actually 11 kilobytes, is like a full node for one account, right? So like you as a normal user, you usually want access to one account. And for that, you have the 11 kilobytes consists of the proof, the canonical proof, as well as the Merkle root and the Merkle branch to your own account, and then certain other metadata that allows you to send transactions and sign transactions and whatnot, right? Similarly, in a bridge here, we haven't yet figured this out, but likely there will be one smart contract on Ethereum probably will be the Mina full node watcher, let's say, like that's just going to update with each proof. And then there will be a second smart contract that monitors the Merkle branch just for that specific Snap account that you want, right? So that smart contract is going to update its state, basically, and make sure that the state it has is against, or its Merkle root is within or is compliant against the latest canonical proof. And then there will be a third smart contract, which is the actual app that wants to ingest this data. So it's going to ping both of those smart contracts and make sure that it gets the data it wants, and it confirms that the data is from the latest state, which is guaranteed by the canonical proof.
Okay, I think I understand this now.
Awesome.
Very, very cool. Where do you picture the builders living in this scenario? Do you picture a Snap builder, especially if they're like bridge users, would they be working on both sides of this bridge? Or do you actually imagine like Snaps existing and then Ethereum dApps using or just interacting with those? I guess it depends.
It depends. The way we see this is that a dApp developer on Ethereum or other chains will basically also develop their own Snap. And that's why also, right, we wanted to go down the path of TypeScript because it's way more universal than anything else. Maybe barring Solidity because we're in the space, but you know what we mean. Such that, it's not too hard for a Solidity developer to pick it up and then basically deploy their own Snap on Mina, and then leverage the bridge, right? So yeah, we want it to be easy such that any developer can pick it up.
Cool. So I think we've covered Snaps pretty well. I feel like I have a way deeper understanding on how they work, on how developers could potentially interact with them, maybe even how users could sort of understand how they're interacting with them. But where are we at with Snaps, actually? Like, how far along is Mina to having Snaps be live? I'm just curious a little bit about your roadmap. When can we expect Snaps on the market?
So the goal, so there's like a few different pieces of the puzzle. There's like the support at the kind of bare protocol level, and then there's the developer tooling. So on the protocol level, the goal is to, have them running in our next testnet in November. And on the developer tools level, we have kind of the initial version of Snarky.js out there. We recently had a small workshop with developers starting to use it, and there was like really positive feedback. So that's really exciting. There's still some more work to be done on the tooling side before it's super ready, but that's kind of the current state of things. So I guess the short answer though is like on the protocol side, it will, inshallah, hopefully be on the November release.
It sounds a bit like soon TM. It's like, I know it's always like a little scary to predict, but it sounds like you're close. So like maybe end of this year?
Yeah, that's definitely one hope. We hope we do have a good sense of how we're progressing after having been through many of this to launching mainnet, and this one feels good. So crossing our fingers.
I mean, I think this is going to be a super cool like platform basically to start experimenting with some of these zero knowledge ideas that have been floating around for a while. Like I remember on a previous episode, you had shared actually this idea, Izaak, of being able to prove in closed source repos that some piece of code is in there. And like the thing is, that was always amazing theoretically, like with a zero knowledge proof. But like I personally didn't understand how you actually get from there to like these blockchains that we're working on. And it sounds like with Snaps, you're bringing it, like that's the bridge. That's the thing. That's where you get to actually experiment and build these real zero knowledge cases and actually see, I guess, what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, totally. Because like you need, in order to like have zero knowledge be meaningful or whatever, like you need to have some meaningful data that you're keeping private, right? And until now, there's been definitely a lack of that. So I think it should unlock a lot of cool applications.
Cool. Well, I want to say a big thank you to both of you for coming on the show and exploring snaps like in depth. This is kind of what I've been wanting to do for a while. I'm so glad I got a chance to do it. So yeah, thanks so much for being on here.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Anna.
Thanks, Anna.
And I do want to mention that like this fall, actually, there's an event that the ZKV and the ZK podcast are actually putting together called ZK Hack. Mina, you folks are going to be a participant in this. So there will be a workshop, hopefully near the end of November-ish. And yeah, I guess it will be very exciting to see where you guys are at by then. And hopefully we'll get a chance to start playing with these things.
Yeah, we're super excited to get in front of developers and really see, what the power of ZKPs allows in terms of creativity and new novel applications for crypto.
I want to say thank you to the podcast editor, Henrik, the podcast producer, Tanya, and to our listeners. Thanks for listening.